Bob Arum says that he hopes for Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford early next year. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. If you want to become part of the gang, notification gang, please hit the bell icon. Shout out to the super chats, channel donations, the Venmo donations, and the Patreon family. We working. Bob Arum did an interview, link in the description, and we'll jump into it. He says, I would hope next year for Spence and Crawford to fight early next year. We could get that fight. That's the only fight that makes sense in the welterweight division and getting a big number. Spence and Porter is a good fight, but it's not a pay-per-view fight. But if Spence and Crawford win their fights this year, that's a major fight. That is correct. You know, he says Wilder Fury is fighting, you know, and that's a good blueprint to set the stage. He now says he's willing to work with other promoters and Al Heyman. He said the idea that promoters won't work together is ridiculous. We always believe we should work with the other side, whatever the side is. I think Al Heyman is coming around to that. Listen, we just did a big fight with Eddie Hearn in England where he was the main promoter and ESPN Plus showed the fight. The fight before that was Anthony Corolla, and that was his fighter. And of course, we had Jose Ramirez go over to DAZN and fight Maurice Hooker. Then he came back to ESPN. He left with one title and comes back with two. So that was a pretty good deal and a big bag of money. So I'm not going to go too far in depth. Spence versus Crawford is a good fight. Spence has to get past Porter. End of story. Crawford's going to fight again. He has to get past that opponent. So I'm not going to hold my breath. The other thing is this. I think, first of all, we got to analyze and break down what Bob Arum says. Bob Arum's been in the business. He knows how to MC the crowd and, you know, kind of say things that sounds good, but, you know, there's deeper rooted intentions there. And he just says things. Like, for example, in this interview, he says Spence versus Porter is a good fight, but it's not a pay-per-view fight. Yet this is coming from the same person that put Terence Crawford versus Amir Khan. Amir Khan coming off of a horrible performance with Samuel Vargas where he was knocked down and hurt again later in the fight to get a victory. This is the same Amir Khan that got, you know, a couple fights removed from a Canelo brutal knockout. And on ESPN pay-per-view, he put Terence Crawford versus Amir Khan as a pay-per-view. So for him to say Spence and Porter is a good fight, but it's not pay-per-view, I mean, then why did you put a lesser fight? I mean, name somebody if we're being, see, this is why new media is so impactful. We don't just accept what's being said and run with it. Is Errol Spence versus Sean Porter in a unification? He's admitting it's a good fight. So he's already saying that. But my thing is, it's a unification, and what is more desired, Spence versus Porter on Fox pay-per-view, or Terence Crawford versus Terence Crawford versus Amir Khan on ESPN pay-per-view? It's a no-brainer. Beyond that, I think PBC, Fox, they did a good job with the undercard. David Benavidez, Anthony Durrell, that could have easily been a Fox main event or, you know, on Showtime main event by itself. And that's the co-feature. Plus, you got Joey Spencer. You got John Molina Jr. versus Jose Cito Lopez. Mario Barrios, upcoming guy. That's my guy. Shout out to Texas. You know, so it's definitely a pretty stacked card. So Bob Arum does stuff like that. Like, he'll criticize, you know, Andy Ruiz. But when he had Andy Ruiz, he didn't say nothing bad about Andy Ruiz. He said Andy Ruiz should fight Joshua when he had him. And then when Andy Ruiz goes over to Al Heyman and stops Joshua in impressive fashion, becomes the first ever Mexican-American heavyweight champion ever, and he's being marveled. You hear Bob Arum do interviews, and it sounds like he's a bit of sour grapes, you know, saying Andy Ruiz don't punch that hard, and, you know, that wasn't Joshua, it was a clone. So you got to take what Bob Arum says with a grain of salt, because sometimes he says things to move and sway the crowd. Now, back to the main, you know, purpose of this video, Spence versus Crawford. It's a good fight, but Bob Arum, it's ironic that he's now saying that the idea promoters won't work together is ridiculous. I feel like he's one of the people back in the day when around the Mayweather Pacquiao time that started that kind of Cold War type of attitude. But it just goes to show you how much time has changed. In fact, DBN has an interview with Bob Arum, and he asked him specifically, he says, are you willing to work with Al Heyman? This was like 2-3 years ago. And then Bob Arum, he says, nope, and smirked and walked away. And that was the end of the interview. You could find it on YouTube. DBN, Bob Arum says he wouldn't work with him. So now he's saying the idea promoters won't work together is ridiculous. So ultimately, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I think it's a sign of the times. I think Arum is realizing that the current market, you better just get that money. You know what I'm saying? It's like you don't have the stable that, like with Pacquiao, and Pacquiao being a phenom and pay-per-view superstar. Pay-per-view, just to be a pay-per-view star now is different, and I would say harder with all the different methods of watching the stuff illegally and all that. So now we're seeing the kind of the Cold War settled, and he is right. He did send Jose Ramirez to fight Maurice Hooker on DAZN. That was cool, and he came back with 2 titles, so that part is correct. Anthony Corolla versus Lomachenko, I don't really count that because that's a mandatory. Demetrius Andrade and Billy Joe Saunders, at the time Saunders had a promoter, Frank Warren, and then Andrade had Eddie Hearn. They don't really particularly like each other, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, and they had to work together on a mandatory. So I think mandatories are different. I'm more interested in the fights that you put together with other promoters that aren't mandatory, because mandatory is just like it sounds. It's a mandatory. Either that champion has to fight this mandatory, or he runs the risk of getting stripped if he doesn't have a valid reason why he's not fighting his mandatory, or the mandatory will lose their ranking if they refuse to fight the champion. So mandatories are different because it's absolutely that. But fights with like Luke Campbell, that's another mandatory. So yeah, they work together, but I don't really consider those. Jose Ramirez versus Maurice Hooker is probably the best example recently, because it was a top-ranked fighter who literally went over and fought against a champion in a unification on another app. But that was a smart bet. That's just like sending Oscar Rivas to fight Dillian White. Those made sense because Oscar Rivas is not your bread and butter cash cow type of person, and he had a chance to maybe shock Dillian White, which he lost the fight, but he still dropped him. So his stock is not really hurt by that. Beyond that, Dillian White failed a drug test, and we still haven't seen his B sample. So in my opinion, Arum is calculated. Top Rank's calculated. They'll send guys over, but it's at their mercy. Like, do you think they would send Lomachenko over to fight Gervonta Tank Davis on Showtime? Probably not. You get what I'm saying? They would want to be somehow involved in the networking of that, like, that network deal. You know what I'm saying? So back to Spence Crawford. It's a good fight. There's other fights. I think Crawford is a phenomenal fighter, as is Errol Spence. They're putting Errol Spence in front of millions of eyes, put him at Dallas Cowboys games, and I think Arum is realizing that Spence has the ability. This modern age of boxing. It's not even just about skill set and how you fight, because Crawford's amongst the best of them with that, but the branding and stuff. Errol Spence has had better opportunity. Like pretty much every opportunity that Crawford has had, like in terms of getting major spotlights, you kind of see with Errol Spence, if not greater. Like the Dallas Cowboys game, Fox is actually spending time and putting Spence in, like, doing little segments with him and having him at Dallas Cowboys games and cross branding and all that type of stuff. So I think Bob Arum realizes that. That's why he keeps pushing for this particular fight, is because he realizes he don't hold all the cards, and the longer that they wait, if Errol Spence keeps doing what he's been doing, he's looking like that boy. So if he keeps doing what he's been doing, then it's going to be harder and harder to dictate to him, and then their fighter Crawford is going to have to fight Spence, kind of bend to his will and give into, I guess, his demands and not take the lion's share of money type shit, you know, and that's just what it is. And I think Bob Arum is coming to grips with that. So he's almost in a way conceding, you know. But I think Wilder Fury happening, if the fight goes through, they both get past their next challenges and stuff, I think that's a good sign for fans, because we don't care as fans. We don't care about the drama and the telenovela soap opera shit. We just want to see the good fights. So I'm not gonna hold my breath for a fight with Crawford Spence. I think it'll happen, but it'll happen when it happens, you know. Let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. That's my thoughts and Bob Arum's statements. Make sure you smash the like button. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, is Ego signing off. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxing Ego, the future of boxing.